Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
No. All right. So, those of you who weren't there for yesterday's uh, yesterday evening's meeting, there was considerable talk about opting for this. What's that? The dual degree option, and I strongly urge all of you to consider that. I do know that it's only applicable for those who have CGPA greater than 8 or 7.5 in the case of students from the SCST background. But for the rest of you who feel that your CGPA is not high enough, for example, let us say you're at 7.5, right? So now you know it early enough. You have this entire semester. You're taking 4 or 5 courses. If you get good grades in them and you're able to sufficiently push your grade up from 7.5 to 8, then it means the option of taking those taking that dual degree option opens out to you as well, right? So I would strongly suggest that you take it very seriously. Those of you who are already above 8, make sure you don't fall below 8 now in this semester. You have to do well. And those of you who are below 8, it's a chance for you to improve your CGPA and uh, uh, try to get into the 8 CGPA bracket. All right. So that's my and there are 4 options for your dual degree. All right. So you can do it in structural engineering, you can do it in transportation, you can do it in geotechnical, you can do it in environmental and water resources. So 4 options for your dual degree. So it's really good. Okay. So today, what time is it now? It's 10:50, almost 10:59. If you have your emails open simultaneously, you should receive a notification for a surprise quiz. In case you don't, you can check the chat window, click on that, and you can start taking the surprise quiz. It's about 10 minutes long. All the best. I'll keep quiet for the rest of the time. Okay, so today's lecture is going to be looking at precipitation, which is one of the most important processes in the hydrologic cycle. Okay, I'm going to send out maybe about 10 or 15 pages of notes today, which will have some details about precipitation and so on. But today I'm going to cover, very quickly some of the most fundamental aspects. More information can be found in the notes. You can read that notes and it will be fairly self-explanatory. Okay, it's nothing much. Whatever is easy, that stuff I'm going to give it to you directly in the form of notes. Whatever stuff requires more explanation, okay, that we'll cover in the class. Okay, so in terms of precipitation, the first important thing that you need to understand about precipitation is that firstly there are different types of precipitation, right? We spoke about this in probably the first lecture. So you have rain, you have snow, there's drizzle, there's glaze, there's sleet and hail. All these are different types of precipitation. I'm not going to get into what the definition for each of these types is. All of that you can find in your notes that I'm going to be sharing after class. Okay, so there's going to be notes, very detailed notes, which will explain what these different types are, what the distinctions between them are. All you need to remember is that there are these different types of precipitation. And for the purpose of, for this particular course and for the rest of the semester, when I say precipitation, I only mean rainfall. right? Because we live in a country where the majority of the regions of the country only receive rain. They don't receive any snow. They may receive drizzle and so on, but we are only interested in rain. So for the rest of the semester, if I say precipitation, I mean rainfall, and if I say rainfall, I mean precipitation. All right. So we are going to use rainfall interchangeably with precipitation, considering that we are in India and it covers most of the people in the country. Rainfall covers precipitation, right? We don't receive the other forms of precipitation. Principally snow we don't receive. Okay, so that's as far as the different types of precipitation are concerned. Then the different kinds of weather systems that cause precipitation. This again, there are some terminology. I'll just give the brief names of those. You can look back into the notes to understand what these different terminologies mean. I can give you a brief description right now. So the different systems are, the different weather systems that cause rainfall are fronts, cyclones, anticyclones, convective precipitation, and orographic precipitation. These are the different, broadly speaking, these are the different types of weather systems that cause rainfall. Now, when I say front typically refers to when I have a mass of air, which is a warm mass of air and a cold mass of air, right? So if I have two masses of air, which are one is warm, one is cold, when these two come in contact with each other, right? Because of various meteorological phenomena, right? I have a warm mass of air and a cold mass of air. When these two come in contact, right, the warm mass of air is it heavier or lighter than the cold mass of air?
Lighter.
Lighter, right? So when the warm mass of air comes in contact with the cold mass of air, because it's lighter, it goes above, right? So the warm mass of air will go above the cold mass of air, and because it goes higher, then the warm mass of air, because higher altitudes will have lower temperatures, then the condensation will happen, and then it will result in precipitation. Those kinds of systems that provide rainfall are called fronts. That's when a warm front comes in contact with a cold front, something like that. Okay, and then the other predominant kind of feature, a system that brings about precipitation, is what is called a cyclone, right? So all of you know what a cyclone is, right? Every time in between the months of June and October, November, you have lots of cyclones which are formed in the Arabian Sea or in the Bay of Bengal, which come and hit the Indian landmass and that produce precipitation. Now, a cyclone is basically an area of low pressure. Okay, an area of low pressure that moves, that kind of circulates in some kind of a clockwise direction and so on. And then
Sir, what is
that?
What is the difference between cyclone and storm?
Okay, so now when you say storm, typically what they say is a cyclonic storm is what they say. Okay, sometimes you use we hear the word a thunderstorm. See, you can also have sandstorms. A storm is basically, you can call it some kind of high winds, high velocity winds that are blowing. It could be blowing with moisture, it could be blowing without moisture, it could be a sandstorm, for example, right? That's also called a storm. Now, a storm is more of a colloquial usage. Okay, I don't know if there's a very precise definition for a storm, but a cyclone is very well defined. A cyclone is an area of low pressure which typically forms in the ocean, and then which moves towards the land with some high velocities. It could be 100 kilometers per hour, 200 kilometers per hour, and so on. Yes, Chakrata.
What is difference between hurricane and cyclone, hurricane, something like that?
Okay, so now these cyclones, typically they are formed in the tropical regions of the world, right? Between the equator and the tropics. You know what the tropics are, right? The Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. These are the tropical areas. So cyclones most often are formed in the tropical regions between the equator and the tropics, right? In different parts of the world, cyclones have different names, right? In India, we call it cyclone. In the US, they call it a hurricane. Same thing. It just has a different name. In Japan, what is it called? Does anybody know what the name for a cyclone in Japan is? Or in Southeast Asia, not just Japan, but most often in Japan. How many of you have heard the word typhoon?
Yes.
Yes, typhoon, right? So a typhoon or a cyclone or a hurricane, these are all different names given for the same phenomena, which is called a cyclone. Okay. So cyclone is a low pressure area. And then the other one that's mentioned right next to it is anticyclone. An anticyclone is a high pressure area. Okay. These anticyclones are not very common. Okay. And they do not bring about a large amount of rainfall. They are called anticyclones because they are a high pressure area. So that's the predominant distinction between a cyclone and an anticyclone, is that cyclone is a low pressure area, anticyclone is a high pressure area. Okay. You can remember this if you want. It's not something that's, as a civil engineer, we don't care about this so much. This is just information for all of you. Okay. So that's cyclone and anticyclone. Then the other one is the convective precipitation. Now this is what I spoke about maybe in the earlier first or second lecture. We spoke about what is the thunder showers or thunderstorms, right? Thunderstorms are an example of convective precipitation. Convective precipitation is when I have intense heating. Okay, in the summer you have an intense heat wave. For example, during the daytime you have a lot of heat being generated, which causes the the air mass above the land to get very, very warm. And as you know, when you have warm air, it tends to rise up. When it rises up, it leaves a low pressure above the land surface, right? And so whenever I have a low pressure, the air from the surrounding areas, which may be at a higher pressure, tries to come in and neutralize it, right? Nature does not like a vacuum. When I have low pressure, that's kind of like a vacuum, right? Nature does not like a vacuum, so it tries to equalize that, and higher pressure from the surrounding areas comes in. And when this higher pressure regions, typically which may have some moisture in them, when they come in, there's a contact between this between the warmer air mass and the cooler air mass, which is also a kind of a front. You can think about it that way. So then you have what is called a thunder shower. More precisely, it's called convective precipitation, and this typically happens in the summer. Okay, that's convective precipitation. The other is orographic precipitation. Now, orographic precipitation means a precipitation that happens in an area where there's a mountainous region, right? Suppose I have an air mass which is filled with moisture, right? When there's a barrier towards it flowing, right? The air mass may be flowing in a certain direction due to the presence of wind or whatever it may be. If there's a mountain which is obstructing the flow of this air mass, see, if it's obstructed, what does it do? The only way it can move is it can only move upwards, right? If it's trying to move in the horizontal direction, but a mountain is prohibiting it from moving, then that warm air mass or the moist air mass will move up. When it moves up, it cools down. When it cools down, it condenses and it forms and it results in precipitation. So that is called orographic precipitation. Okay, so these are some of the common systems that cause precipitation. Okay, so I'm not expecting you to remember all these things, but you need to, general understanding you need to have about these different types of systems that cause precipitation. All right.
Sir, okay. What is the process of anticyclone?
What is that?
What is the process of anticyclone?
It is an area of high pressure, and it occupies a larger area. So I don't understand what you mean by process. It has high pressure.
I mean, how it is developed?
How it is developed? Okay, that even I don't know. I've never thought about how it develops to be in the details of it. I do not know. So maybe you will have to speak to a meteorologist, because the atmospheric phenomena that causes an anticyclone to develop, I'm unaware of it. Okay, Google it. I'm sure you'll find it on Google. Okay. Cyclone, what causes it to happen? Again, if you ask me exactly what are the processes that cause a cyclone to happen, that also, I mean, if you ask me too many details, I don't know. What I do know is it happens during the summer months in the northern hemisphere, when I have intense heating of the oceans. So when a lot of heating happens during the summer months, the air mass starts to become warmer, and it rises up, and then that creates a low pressure area, and then it creates some kind of what is it called? this I don't exactly understand why it causes this circular movement. Okay, whether it's a cyclone or an anticyclone, it causes some kind of a circular movement, right? And that circular movement moves in a certain direction because of the because of atmospheric currents and so on. I'm not very familiar with all of those factors, but the distinction between cyclone and anticyclone is that one is low pressure area and the other is a high pressure area. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So this again about the Indian monsoon, we spoke about this in the earlier lectures. So we have the two types of Indian monsoon. One is the southwest monsoon, which happens between June and September, and the other is the northeast monsoon, which is also sometimes called the retreating monsoon. Right? It's called the retreating monsoon, and that takes place between October and December. Typically, by the second week of December, it's over. So it doesn't cover the whole of December. At most, it may extend up to the maybe December 15th or so, December 20th at most. Beyond that, you don't get rainfall in the northeast or the retreating monsoon. Okay. All right. So now that you understand there are different processes that bring about precipitation, the other interesting thing that we need to understand is how is precipitation measured, right? So we are only interested in how it's measured and how it impacts us as as engineers. Okay. So the simplest thing that I want to tell you is that precipitation is expressed in terms of depth of water. Now somebody asked this question, I think in the first or second lecture, why are you saying it in centimeters? Why are you not saying it in terms of volume, right? Now the volume it's difficult to express it in terms of volumes. It's not impossible. It's difficult because when I measure it at a certain location, right, I'm measuring, let us say the depth of water. I have to multiply that by the area over which that depth happens, right? I don't know how large an area is experiencing the same depth of water, same depth of rainfall, right? So for example, you may hear this. Sometimes people will say, oh, it's raining in near my house, but somebody who's living 5 kilometers away, oh, I'm not getting any rain. I'm sure you've experienced this, right? You're especially if you're in a city and you have a friend who lives in a different part of the city. You tell your friend, hey, it's raining near my house, and then your friend will say, hey, but it's not raining near my house, and the distance is only 5 kilometers, right? So it may rain in one place, but it may not rain in another place. It may rain heavily in one place, but it may rain a little bit of rainfall may happen somewhere, a few kilometers away. So then, if the rainfall is so much distributed in terms of space, to measure it in terms of volume becomes difficult, right? So we always measure rainfall in terms of depth. Then you can measure it at different places, right? I can measure it here. I can measure it 5 kilometers away. I can measure it 10 kilometers away and so on. And then I'll be able to estimate what kind of volume we are getting. You can estimate the volume, but it's a little bit more involved. It's much more easier to measure the depth of water that I receive at a particular location, because that depth varies from place to place. Even in the same rainfall event, right? Even within the same rainfall event, two places which are very close to each other may receive different amounts of rainfall, right? So I can measure it at both places, and then I can compute the volume, right? But the basic unit that you measure is the depth of water that is received at a particular location. Okay. And now the device that is used to measure this depth of precipitation is what is called a rain gauge, right? So rain gauges are of different types. All of this, again, I'm going to be sending you notes. You'll see more details of all of these different types of rain gauges in the notes. You have non-recording type, you have recording type, you have what is called telemetry. Telemetry is when I have a device which is able to send you. So, for example, I may install a rain gauge with a telemetric device on my campus, in the permanent campus. Okay, but sitting here, I can send an SMS to that device and say, okay, how much rainfall did you receive in the last 1 hour, and it will reply back to me, right? Through SMS, it will send me a message saying, okay, in the last 1 hour at this location, I received 2 centimeters of rain, right? So telemetry means that this device is connected to a network. Okay, So you can infer how much rainfall was recorded in the last 1 hour, last half an hour, whatever it may be. Okay, typically what is done is you install these rain gauges at different parts of your watershed or your catchment. Okay, so then once you have different gauges located at different locations, they will every 1 hour they will send a message to a central server or something like that, right? So if you go online to Andhra Pradesh's website, it will record the rainfall received in the last 1 hour from almost 1,000 locations all over the state of Andhra Pradesh. How is that happening? It is happening through what is called telemetry, right? So these devices will have attached to them a device that allows it to transmit information either through GPS or through SMS or whatever it may be. Okay, so they can access a server and upload that information to the server, which you can access remotely. Okay, so that's what telemetry means. And then another way of measuring rainfall is using a radar. Okay, a radar, you know what a radar is, right? It's a device that allows you to see the presence of maybe aeroplanes and so on in the neighborhood. Similarly, you can use some radars that allow you to estimate the amount of rainfall that is happening over a large area. Okay, so those are some of the devices that are used to measure rainfall. And the notes that I'm going to send you will have more details about it. If you want more details, you can go into that and try to get that information. Okay. All right. So as I said, you may have a network of rain gauges installed over a given area. Okay. So which allows you to estimate the rainfall that's happening over an entire area. Okay. And then typically it is desirable to have a rain gauge network with a certain density of rain gauges, right? So if I install a rain gauge at a particular location, how far away do I have to go to install the next rain gauge, right? If I want to estimate the distribution of rainfall over an area, I'll have to install rain gauges at multiple locations, right? So what should be the optimum spacing between these rain gauges to create a network of rain gauges, right? So there's some recommendations available in the literature. It says if I have a plain, right? Plains mean if the location, if the area that you're looking at is very flat, generally has a very flat surface, then it is recommended. This is all available in the literature. I'll be sending you the notes. Okay, so you don't have to memorize all this. It's just information. Okay, so if I have a plain, then you install one station every 520 square kilometers or whatever it is. Okay, to give you an idea of what 520 square kilometers is, our permanent campus that we are going to, that you're already living on, that construction is going on right now. The area of our permanent campus is about 500 and something acres. Okay, so how much is that? That's about 200 hectares, I think. Okay, 200 hectares. So that will be 2 into 10 power 6 square. So our campus is about 2 square kilometers. Okay, our campus is 2 square kilometers. Okay, so imagine how much 500 square kilometers will be. Fairly large area. So if you have one station for 500 square kilometers, that is supposed to be adequate if you are in the plains. If you are in a region where the elevation is slightly higher, okay, where you have kind of hilly areas, then it is recommended that you have a station every 200 to 400 square kilometers. And if you are in a hilly area where there's heavy rainfall, it's recommended to have more higher density of rain gauges. Okay, this is all just some basic information. You will see all of this in the notes. So don't worry about memorizing all this. You're not going to be expected to remember how many square kilometers per for a rain gauge and so on. Okay, this is just information. Okay, so now,
Sir?
Yes.
No, if then we are not get the amount of rainfall now. If we are dispersing rain gauges within a large amount of area, it's like for a large area we are placing one rain gauge, no, sir.
Yeah.
So within the area we will have multiple small areas where we will get different rainfalls.
Yeah.
So how come you can?
No. See, the thing is this. Is it feasible to put a rain gauge everywhere? every
Cannot
single
be.
street? It's not possible, right? You also have to look at the cost. I mean, each rain gauge may cost, let us say, 2 lakhs or 5 lakhs or whatever it is. Okay. So if you want to put a rain gauge every square kilometer, you know what the area of Chittoor district is? 15,000 square kilometers. Okay. 15,000 square kilometers is the area of Chittoor district. And Chittoor district has about 100, around 100 rain gauges, which is pretty good if you think about it. Okay. 15,000 divided by 100. How much is that? 150 square kilometers. One every 150 square kilometers. So that's pretty good, right? If you look at this recommendation over here, Chittoor district has a good distribution of rain gauges over the area. Actually, Andhra Pradesh is probably one of the regions in India which has a good distribution of rainfall gauges and so on, right? Because they are able to spend money on, invest money into all of this. But if you want to, get even more detailed information, you'll have to spend more money, right? So, and of course, now the advantage is this. See, if you have some kind of radar based measurement, that can give you very, very fine resolution. I think that gives you about 1.6 kilometer by 1.6 kilometer. That's about, how much is that? 2.5 square kilometers. It will give you a reading for every two square kilometers or 4 square kilometers, something like that. Okay, so radar can give you much more fine resolution. But again, then you'll have to install these radars everywhere so that it can cover the entire region. Okay, so this is all very expensive. Okay, so you do live with some level of uncertainty depending on how many rain gauges you have. At least in the state of Andhra Pradesh, I believe that it has a fairly good distribution of rainfall gauges. And now there's even advanced techniques coming up, with remote sensing, with all kinds of techniques are coming up to estimate what the rainfall over an area is and so on. Okay, and some of them have pretty good resolution. Even with remote sensing, you can't get very, very, very high resolution. But if you are interested in a particular area, right? Suppose you want to study a certain area and you want to know exactly how everything behaves in that small area, then you have the luxury of installing multiple rain gauges in that area, and then try to get more information. Okay, so yesterday we spoke about in the meeting in the evening, we spoke about jobs and your career prospects and so on. Now think about this. How many of you have heard the phrase crowdsourcing?
Yeah.
Have you heard this phrase crowdsourcing?
No, sir.
No? Okay, so you guys need to understand all these things. So for example, what is done is, suppose you want to make a movie, okay, and you don't have any money. You just tell your friends, and then maybe make a short 2-minute movie and then put it up online, and then tell people that I want to make a bigger movie. Can you contribute some money and create an account where the people can contribute their money, and then you make the full 1 hour movie or 2 hour movie or whatever it is, okay, using your own camera or something like that. That's called crowdsourcing. Okay, so that can be, you can use crowdsourcing to make money, okay, to make a movie, or to get some money to make a movie also. But you can also use crowdsourcing. For example, let us say, now imagine this, everybody has a smartphone, okay, and then you agree, if you're driving on the road, you turn on your Google Maps and you're driving, right? Google is collecting information from every single user who has a smartphone. So Google is able to predict what the traffic is in this region, whether there's a traffic jam. If you're driving from place A to place B, Google will tell you, don't take this road, there's a lot of traffic there. How does Google know that? It is getting information from everybody's smartphone, and it's able to convert that into some information for you. So if you're saying, I want to go from here to there, it says, don't take this road, go by this road, there's a lot of traffic on this road. Okay, so that is also crowdsourcing in a way. Now imagine this, if you can ask everybody to set up a simple rain gauge in their house. Okay, suppose you start a company. You can start a company which says, I will crowdsource information about rainfall. Every house I'll ask them to set up a simple rainfall gauge in their house and ask them to upload whatever rain they receive, and they'll put it up on the server. I'll collect that information and I'll process it and try to find out how rainfall is distributed. That could be an idea for a startup. I don't know. I'm just saying. You could crowdsource information about rainfall. Right? You could crowdsource information about groundwater levels. You could ask everybody, if you have a well in your house, just tell us what the depth of water in the well in your house is. The government is setting up monitoring wells everywhere all over the place, but they can't set up a monitoring well in every single house. But everybody has a smartphone in their house, so they go to their well in their house. They look at the water level in their well, and then they just put it up on an app. You can create an app which collects information. It could collect information about rainfall. It could collect information about the depth of water in their well. It could collect information about the wind speed, whatever it is, right? It could collect. You can crowdsource this information, collect it, and do some machine learning, do artificial intelligence, and give some information that is useful for somebody, right? So don't be under the impression that there's no as a civil engineer you can't come up with an idea for a startup, right? There's lots of ideas available, right? You'll have to be creative. You'll have to see, the civil engineering courses will give you the background that is required to understand the civil engineering problems. And then you take some understanding that you've gained from, let us say you take a machine learning course, or you take an artificial intelligence course, or you take a statistics course in the mathematics department. You take that information, try to use that along with your civil engineering information, and maybe you have a good idea for a startup. I don't know, right? So the possibilities are endless. It's up to you to explore those options, right? So like you asked very rightly, the question was an absolutely correct question, right? Okay, so what if I want more detailed information about rainfall? Instead of spending a lot of money in trying to set up rainfall gauges everywhere in every street, you could crowdsource information. On every street, there may be 100 people living. If you can even get 5 people to respond, hey, how much rainfall did you receive? Just go and put up, a cup on your terrace which has some markings on it, and then every 6 hours or something, you measure the amount of water level in that cup, and you put it up in an app and just upload it. And you collect all that information, because if I send it from my given location, it gives you the latitude, longitude, and all that, right? You guys should know all this. You guys should take advantage of all this information, right? There's lots of opportunities. Don't be under the illusion that you have to go and work for a company. You can start your own company, right? But of course, it requires a lot of hard work. It requires a lot of imagination. It requires a lot of understanding of the market and so on. So explore those options, right? So you took a course in entrepreneurship in the summer, right? Some of you guys take that? Maybe the fourth year guys did that. Sorry. Anyway, but there are options to learn about. Okay, I'm unnecessarily going into other details and wasting my time. Okay, but no, I don't think it's a waste of time. Sorry. I do think it's important for you to also explore these things. Okay. So any questions on this measuring precipitation?
No, sir.
Okay. So now, let us say you have set up a network of rain gauges, and sometimes it so happens that you have set up, let us say, 20 gauges over in a catchment, and for some reason one gauge is malfunctioning. Okay, so I'm just going to draw okay, let's see. Let us say I draw this is my watershed, or this is my catchment, let us say. Okay, so inside this, I'm able to set up some multiple rain gauges. Okay, so let me set up rain gauges over here at some resolution. Okay, okay, so I'll call them 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, all the way to oops, n. Okay, so let's say there are n gauges all over this watershed, which are all measuring rainfall. Okay, let us say it happens that in these gauges have been measuring rainfall for the last 10-15 years. Okay, suddenly you realize that this given year one of these rain gauges has stopped functioning. Okay, so one of these rain gauges, let us say this rain gauge over here. Okay, at the end of the year you notice that this particular rain gauge, I'm going to call it rain gauge X. Oh, the symbol is also X, so then it becomes difficult. Sorry. Let's call it Y maybe. Huh? So this rain gauge Y is missing the data for a given year. Okay, you collected data for the last 10 years, all of the gauges are working fine, but last year for some reason all the other gauges were working fine, but only rain gauge Y stopped working for some reason. Okay, maybe the battery died in that gauge or whatever happened, something happened and you lost information. Now you go back and you're looking at the last 15 years of data. 14 years data is available, but the 15th year data is not available for this one rain gauge. Okay, all the other rain gauges are functioning fine. Okay, now is there something you can do to find out how much rain this rain gauge Y must have received in that year? Is there something you can do using the information that's available?
Conservation of mass.
Conservation of mass. Okay.
Water mass or volume of water. Data
Okay.
storage.
No, 1 second. So we don't have any, there's no physics here that, we don't have any information about the physics.
Means we have the area, catchment area, no? And rainfall at rest of the places, and
Yeah.
we only
But,
have to
but
find
as you know, Chakradhar, but as you know, there's no connection between, there's no guarantee that if location 5, 6, 7, 8 received so much rainfall last year, and this year they receive some amount of rainfall, why you should also receive in the same proportion or whatever it is. It's difficult to say that.
but we have runoff and percolation values.
No, you don't have anything else. You only you only have rainfall information. Okay, you only have rainfall information at 1, 2, 3, 4, all these locations for all 15 years. Only at location Y you have for 14 years. 15th year is missing. Okay, so the objective is to estimate the missing data. Okay, we are over time, so we will continue on Thursday. Okay, just think about this. You have information for the last 15 years at all the gauges except at location Y. At location Y, you have information for the last 14 years except for the 15th year. Okay, so that is the problem statement, and our objective is to find out how much rainfall happened at location Y.
So what if we find the rainfall of the areas nearby and then maybe kind of draw a graph to estimate?
Yeah, there are so many ways of doing this, right? I'm not going to say that there's only one way of doing it. We will talk about the simplest possible way. We'll talk about that in the next class and we'll continue from there. Okay, so all right, thank you. We will meet on Thursday. I'm going to send you the reading material, so please go through that material before you come on Thursday. And if you have any questions about that, you can ask me on Thursday, or of course email, WhatsApp, all that is always open. All right, thank you. I'll see you on Thursday.